I was able to come up with a few characteristics of a servant. And I mentioned a few, one of them being teachable, flexible, they must have the calling. And also they do not speak about themselves, they speak more of the master yeah. And I quoted Paul, who said that we do not preach about ourselves, we preach about Christ. And I don't know, maybe you can add up on what I said, or you can.
Wendy, thank you. As Pastor Mark put it rightly, and what you're saying, you can get out of your way to meet with the needs of the others, and as I said, your motives could not be right, because you could meet a particular need, especially within an organization, but we could not know the motives, because if you meet the need outside the vision of the organization or the goals or the mission, I'm trying to look for an appropriate example. Let's say you send on a mission, you go out on a mission, the church sends you out, but when you reach there, you may even hold a crusade and look like you're meeting with the needs, the mission, but you're outside, you go there and you go outside the vision of the institution that sends you, then you're not in submission. So I don't know if I would still define that as servanthood, because there's an area that I'm really seeing in the church, as you talked about, mtumishi and servanthood, that is becoming a challenge, because I believe servanthood should also be in context and in submission in order for it to be effective. Because even when you read the book of Acts, I've always tried to study the book of Acts and get an understanding, because now I'm referring to servanthood in terms of ministry, calling, giftings. And when you read the book of Acts, there are so many arguments that people project, and they say, the New Testament believer, everybody is a servant. Yes, everybody is a servant, but we still see order, submission, because even when I think this story of when Philip went to preach, was it in Samaria? Is it in Acts chapter 8? Or
It's in chapter.
Where he dealt with Simon the sorcerer. When he went to preach there, you see Philip the evangelist, he went to preach there, and many people gave their souls to Jesus Christ. And even this particular sorcerer gave his life to Jesus Christ. But we see the apostles coming from Jerusalem. I think it's Peter and John. When they come, we see some order. There's an element of servanthood. They work together, but from the context, it looks like as much as they work together, Philip the evangelist, but you actually see a higher element of authority, because when they come, that's when the motives of Simon the sorcerer are revealed. All this time he was working with Philip the evangelist, testifying. Even the magic books had been banned. But when the apostles come from Jerusalem, I'm not trying to say that Philip is more junior, but there's a particular element of authority which I say about submission and servanthood, because we cannot all be the same and equal. Even when it comes to, because I'm seeing my husband is approaching it from a servant leadership perspective, which I may not, because not all leaders are servant leaders, but it is supposed to be like that, because Jesus was a servant leader, though sometimes it is dangerous because when people tend sometimes, when you are a servant leader, people tend to ignore the submission bit and the authority bit, and sometimes it can create some confusion. So people really need to understand what authority is, boundaries to be defined, so that even when the leader is doing something, let's say in the house, a father goes to the kitchen to do some things and maybe lets the house help relax. There's an understanding that that house help should have. Otherwise, it can be misconstrued because servant leadership also comes with, I think, boundaries need to be defined.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know, Pastor.
Okay. There is a flow of influences. It's not just only the leader that exerts influence on followers, but followers also, in their own way, influence their leader. You see, it's meant to be that way, because otherwise, if the followers don't have an opportunity to influence their leader in any way, even in a little way, however negligible, then we risk having an authoritarian or a dictatorial kind of leadership where it's only the leader who has a monopoly of ideas or what. Even a servant, sometimes we sit in the house, a child suggests something, you can see very well this is just a 5-year-old, but there is something they say. As a parent, you of course will not tell them what you've said is very, very powerful, but later on when you sit to reflect, that statement that child has made has influenced you. You see, so it's an exchange kind of. But then when you come to the ministry, when I talk about servanthood, like now, let's say there is work going on out there. There is the main guy who's doing the fabrication.
Yeah.
But when that man is thirsty, instead of him living there and coming to the house looking, where can I find water? In the meantime, he takes 10 minutes off his work. He's looking for a place to find a cup, to find water, to do that. A young man, a boy who is seated up there, notices this guy is thirsty, and he gets the water. When he brings the water, he gives this man will only need 30 seconds to drink that water. So he has saved 9 minutes. So the work is able to be accomplished and timelines are able to be met. And because this boy has chosen to serve this man, sometimes someone didn't tell him, but he notices, this man I think might need water. I've seen him sweating. So he gets out of his way, comes, brings him water, gives him. So that boy is a servant. You see? In Mtumishi, but nobody might be able to tell him, you've served well in Mtumishi. Everybody, the focus is the main guy who is doing the real contract, the contractor on site. Unasema hii kitu kama ingekuwa mjamaa, this thing would not have happened. But there's a young man who helped him to save 10 minutes of his time, which would have taken walking around looking for water, and he was able to meet the timelines for the work to be done. So that's basically what I mean. It's an exchange. Someone plays their part, a little here, a little there, and at the end of the day, you have a harmony of purpose. Yeah, that's what I mean.
Wow, I think I'm getting to understand that everyone is important in whatever context, because as from the example that he's just given, the boy with a cup of water is as well important, but we won't notice him. We'll notice the one who is doing the fabrication out there. Sometimes we do big things and no one notices, or you do something from your heart, no one notices, but someone else will do it for the purpose of being known or being showing off. Na atajulikana, yani it will trend. It will be the trending thing, So I think the motive, as Prophetess Nakesa said, is also very important.
Yeah.
Because if you do it for showbiz, then you miss the mark. But if you're doing it willingly from your heart, there are times people have done things, and no one noticed. But they get to reap so much because God in secret saw.
It's true.
And he read the heart and he knew this was real. It was true.
And just to say, I cannot stop emphasizing on the point of submission being in context, even family. Servants, children will influence you. But you know, as their leader, when they're influencing you, because the influence could be negative or positive, even when it comes to leadership styles, sometimes followers will influence. Different people will display different leadership styles at different times depending on the circumstance, on the situation. But you see, even that child within the family, whether they are 5 years, you know, when they say something, for you as a parent to be positively influenced, it must be within the vision of the family. But if it is outside, you will take a different. It is true.
Yeah.
That one we cannot. Protocols, submission, even we as servants of God, we need to understand our boundaries. Who are we serving? We can say we are servants of God, preach the gospel, say nice words, quote scriptures. But when we are checked, we are not within the vision, the mission of the Bible. And we are not in submission to our master. So servanthood, outside vision, mission, submission, it just becomes chaotic. It is not servanthood anymore.
Yeah. Then also, just to put into perspective what she's saying, you know, within every context, there's always the leader. You see, there's always a leader. There's always an authority. Even in a family, there's an authority. In a place like this, there's work going outside there. You find that there's the main contractor. There are other people doing all the other work, making sure all of they're all working together. But there's always the person. If the person who has given them the contract comes to ask, there's the person whom he will always ask. He will not just ask randomly any of the workers there. So every time we serve, as I said, we serve within a context, and that context has structures. There's someone with whom the buck stops. At the end of the day, if questions were to arise, there's a person who will answer.
Who is accountable.
Accountable.
Yeah.
But in that context, everybody does their part. Everybody plays their part. But there is always, when things get out of hand and important questions are raised, there's always the person who is held accountable. That's why you often hear this in our nation. Whenever something happens, is a corruption scandal has happened somewhere, people say you take political responsibility. You see, like now, for example, say in a ministry, the chief accounting officer is the principal secretary. The cabinet secretary does not do the accounting. But when things happen in a ministry and funds are lost, even if the cabinet secretary has not appended their signature, they are the ones who are always being questioned. Why? Because the buck always stops with them. They are told, even if you didn't sign, you must take it happened under your watch. You see, so there's always that one person. Everything now, there's a convergence of responsibility. If things don't work the way they're supposed to happen in that space, that one person then takes the blame, because they're the ones now who are supposed to play the coordinating role as the leader.
And then the error comes in when a supposedly servant was out of order, insubordinate, and they began to do things outside the goal, the mission, the vision, the purpose. Because, I didn't finish the other point, because this servanthood, as you said, this is a very wide topic, and especially as leaders, Christian leaders, ministers of the gospel in this servant season, people understanding what servanthood means is very, very important, because you go on social media and everybody is purporting to be a servant of God. And That's why you spoke about, it's like the tenets or the characteristics of servanthood, humility, being teachable. And sometimes you look at believers who just gave their lives to Jesus maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3, and all of a sudden, to be honest, it's not wrong to preach, but you see them, they are the ones now purporting to teach people, posting and calling themselves big names, servants of God. When you look, are they briefcase servants? Because the focus is on themselves. Posting your picture on social media, writing scriptures all the time does not mean you are a servant. You could just be serving your ego and wanting to be noticed, because even service is seen in the people you influence. The fruits are not just influence in terms of getting likes on social media. The Apostle Paul talked about being our first fruit. You know, the work, the effect of your service, the people you minister, you care, you counsel, you pray for, the scriptures when you send, how many do you touch? But there's this deception where people are now serving themselves, especially social media. You look, some of these scriptures that people send in the name of serving people, preaching to people, they are actually supposed to be their own private scriptures for their quiet
Bible study.
time. They are messages. They are not serving, because also teaching and preaching the word of God is doing service.
Yeah.
But if you are not teachable, because you talked about having a teachable spirit, any true servant should be able to be taught. Even we who are ministers of the gospel, we should be able to sit under other ministers who've gone ahead of us, listen to them. People who are experienced, we should also be able to have some quiet time, read the Bible, listen to the great master, allow the Holy Spirit to speak to us. So if we don't even have a teachable spirit, how then do we purport to be
servants.
to be servants?
Yeah, and just as she has said, there is something in servanthood, or in being a servant. At the heart of it all is humility. Humility is the foundation, like the cornerstone of service. Humility. For you to be teachable, you must be humble. For you to be submissive, you must be humble. Everything boils down to humility. And when we look at servanthood, maybe we need to look at things. We need to look at it differently, because there's a difference between follower, and there's a difference between subordinates. Where say you have an organization that has a clear vision, it has written down values and mission statement. That is a formal context where you have the boss, you have the general manager, you have the manager, you have the staff down there who are subordinate. When you talk about subordinate, most of the time you talk about people who give themselves to a vision and a mission and work towards it. Probably not, because sometimes not even if they don't believe in it. He's an office messenger. Even if he doesn't believe in a vision, he's there for a salary. At the end of exactly. So at the end of the day, he doesn't have to believe in the vision. He has been employed there. He does his job. He goes home. At the end of the month, he earns. But when it comes to the issue, when it comes to followership, what leads to follow? Even within that formal context, there can be some subordinates can distinguish themselves as followers. Followership comes as a result of people identifying with a common vision and buying into it.